Today, we shall be looking at the forthcoming 7th edition of the Pmbok Guide. PMI has for quite some time been discussing the need to come out with a new set of standards for the project management area. The Pmbok Guide up to 6th edition has been widely accepted and used by project management practitioners. But with the change in the software project management practices across the world in the last decade plus, with the introduction of agile in a big way and also hybrid methodologies, the PMI has been looking into this area and has been wanting to introduce changes so that it becomes more acceptable in this new era of rapidly changing software management practices. Now, the PMI has already brought in certain changes to the examination pattern. I think most of you know about this. Even though the material for studies is still the Pmbok 6 guide, the exam pattern is now focusing more on process, people, and business instead of just process. This is a precursor to changing the significantly the Pmbok Guide itself, the contents itself. Now the Pmbok Guide 7th edition is supposed to come out sometime around August. Now, before we look at what is going to come into the 7th edition, let's have a look at why this change was necessitated. As I told you briefly, the Pmbok Guide up to the 6th edition has been mostly process focused, and it has been looking more at the predictive project management methods, which have been focusing more on the traditional project management methods, such as the waterfall method of software development. But over the last more than a decade, the agile methods and the hybrid methods have been gaining ground significantly, especially with the onset of mobile applications, web-based applications, and cloud computing. So some of the pure process-oriented methods have been found wanting by the practitioners of these newfound methods, and they've been asking for a lot of changes. So in keeping with the changing times, the PMI has also decided to come out with a new set of standards which can be adopted across the board, irrespective of whether the software project management approach is traditional, agile, or hybrid. So this is what you could call as a significant change, a paradigm shift in the way Pmbok is looking at project management approaches. And is it a dawn of a new era? Is it a significant change? Will it lead to a totally new way of looking at things? Let us see what are the changes proposed and then form our own conclusions about this. So in Pmbok 7, if you compare to the Pmbok 6, which is there on the left-hand side, we had more of process groups. In Pmbok 7, instead of process groups, what we will be seeing is we will be seeing more of a project management principles-based approach. So they are going to outline broad principles on which the project manager or the person's sponsors, even various stakeholders, key stakeholders would be working with. So it is more a principles-based approach instead of a process-based approach. The second aspect which was outlined in the Pmbok was the knowledge group in the 6th edition. But now this has been moved to more of a performance domains. What are the areas of performance for any key player in the project? Typically, it could be a project manager or scrum master or a product owner, project sponsor. So those people have to look at these performance domains and they need to work on this performance areas. We also had concepts of input tools and techniques and outputs, which we used to guide how you worked in each of these areas. Today, that is being replaced by what we know as models, methods, and artifacts. So we look at some detail in each of these and see what those changes which are being brought in the 7 version. So quickly, in our process group approach of Pmbok 6, it was mostly about how you did the project. So if you looked at the process group approach, you had initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. So this was your, primarily this was what drove the framework of Pmbok. But today we are going to look at what Pmbok 7 gives us. Pmbok 7 is more about the what and why. It is not so much about the how. So it's going to outline more the principles of project management. Although if you see, even the word project management is not explicitly used. So if you see, a lot of the terms which we are going to see here are also derived from agile framework, because more and more projects are being taken up under agile. Although Pmbok doesn't explicitly say that it is a little slanted towards agile, but you will see that the philosophy has played a lot of influence in the way the principles have been derived. So they talk about stewardship, be diligent, respectful, and caring steward, which means that the person who is managing the project, or the people who are the key players in the project, have to be diligent, respectful, and caring. They use the word stewardship. So you kind of steer the project. So it's not that you are managing, but you're steering the project. Again, this comes from the agile philosophy, where the Scrum Master is somebody who facilitates, who steers, is not necessarily a manager. Then it talks about the principle of team, where they build a culture of accountability and respect. So again, self-driven teams, accountability, respect being the key principles on which you manage projects. Stakeholder engagement, this continues to be a key principle. Understanding stakeholder needs, because ultimately project success depends on stakeholder needs and meeting those stakeholder needs. So this continues to be a key element of project delivery principle. Value. So this is an important addition, focusing on value, focusing on business value, what value the project delivers. So this is an important element. Again, delivering value to the customer rather than just giving some output, what value it brings to the customer. So this is something which is added. Systems thinking or holistic thinking, have the big picture in mind, interaction between systems, look at the overall picture. So that is something which is being brought in. Leadership, a lot of value given to leadership, motivating, influencing, coaching, learning, all these have been brought in. What used to be human resources and managing people, so that is leadership here. Tailoring. So again, a lot of flexibility has been provided. Tailoring the delivery approach based on the context of the customer. So it's not a very rigid model. There is some leeway given to specifically for that. You can tailor the delivery approach based on what you want, keeping in mind the overall principles. Quality continues to remain as a key principle, building quality into the process so that you can get the required results. So quality is another key element. Complexity. So this time they have brought in complexity, preparing for complexity, addressing complexity, managing risk out of this complexity as one of the key areas of the key principles which has to be addressed. Risk, opportunities, and threats. Again, risk management has always been there. They have also said, look at this as opportunities and threats and how you will address them. So this is one of the principles of the new framework. Adaptability and resilience. So they have talked a lot about uncertainty, VUCA world and all that. So how can you be adaptable and resilience? So how can you build in practices whereby your project and what you deliver can be adaptable and resilient. So there are these 12 principles. The final one being change. How do you enable change to achieve the required results? So here we are talking about, not being unflexible, but being open to change. Again, derived a bit from the agile philosophy. You be a little flexible, be proactive in anticipating change, be proactive, and provide whatever is required to the customer within the framework that you are adopting. And so these 12 principles shall be the guiding principles for any project management framework that you adopt. So the question can be, what does this mean? You are saying we are giving an open framework with so many principles. Does it mean we do not follow these processes? No, earlier Pmbok had 6 process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitor. Are they not relevant any longer? That can be a natural question that can come to people. No, that is not so. What Pmbok now says is that we now lay down these broad principles. You can always, as long as these principles are met, you can definitely have these a plan, execute, monitor, and close kind of a framework. But that will be more of one of the models that you use. That can be a detailed model that you can use, but that is not something that we will insist that as part of the framework. But that is something that could be one of the tools that you are using, one of the models which they have mentioned. So it could be one of the models which you still follow for your predictive kind of a approach. If you are using a waterfall, or if you are using a predictive model, that could be one of your models. If you are using an agile, then you could have an agile scrum based approach. It depends on which one you want to choose. But what we are going to notify here is only these principles. And as long as you can take care of these principles with your model, we are fine with it. That's what I think. That is the direction in which Pmbok is headed. It's going to give you the overall direction, and it's not going to lay down the P's and Q's of every process. That's the way I think it is evolving right now. Let's now look at what is the equivalent of the knowledge areas. So knowledge areas, we had many knowledge areas: scope management, communication management, risk management, integration management, schedule, cost, stakeholder, procurement, quality, resource. All these were part of the knowledge areas. Now these are now kind of replaced by project performance domains. So many of them are kind of subsumed in a few domains that they are now talking about. Again, stakeholder is one of the stakeholder management is now subsumed in stakeholder domain. Team. So team management, resource management, and team management is subsumed in the team. Development approach and life cycle. So all this about scope management, schedule management, etc., is subsumed in development approach and life cycle. Planning activities. Some of these also come in the planning activities. We talk about risk management, communication management, etc. Project work. So some of these planning and project work subsume some of these other activities that we are talking about. Delivery, again, quality comes under delivery, quality. Then measurement. So some of these measurement is another area for performance. So if you have to measure the in terms of metrics, etc., comes under measurement. Uncertainty and risk management comes under uncertainty. So these are the broad performance domains. So what we had as knowledge areas, most of them fold under a reclassified performance domains under Pmbok. So I wouldn't say these have changed significantly, but I would say here they have kind of mapped many of these into specific areas of work based on whether it is a stakeholder, whether it pertains to team, whether it pertains to communication, whether it pertains to a particular development approach, waterfall or agile, and also specifically about whether you're going to measure something, how do you measure the metrics, how you are going to tackle risk. So they have put that into separate boxes. So this is your performance domains. Let's go on to the final one, which is more about the what used to be inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs. Now that is now gone into models, methods, artifacts. So some examples we have. So models. So if you have, so we talked about process groups of, the 6.0 process group. That could be actually one of the models of a development approach that you could have, development and management approach. Situational leadership, which is one of the leadership models, that could be one of the models you use as part of this. ADKAR, which is for change management, that is something which could be one of the models. So these are models which you could use under the Pmbok. So Pmbok leaves it open for you to adopt any global standards, any industry standard models under each of those areas. Methods, lessons learned, story point estimations. So depending on which method you choose, probability and impact matrix, any of these you could use either from Agile, Scrum or Waterfall or hybrid or Kanban, anything you could choose and you could include that as your method. Similarly, artifacts, project charter, risk register, user story, product backlog items, any of these would be artifacts under Pmbok. So as you see, what Pmbok in its 7th edition has done is, in order to make it more universal, more acceptable across different frameworks, whether it be traditional waterfall or agile or hybrid, what they have done is outline the broad principles under which project management or project facilitation, product development should take place. They outlined the key principles, and they have left the actual methodology or the models to be added on as the nuts and bolts for each. So it has left that flexibility. It had left it open for the practitioner to adopt. It has only outlined the broad principles. So the key thing is it has moved from a how to a what and why kind of a framework. So it would be interesting to see what kind of reaction it elicits from the practicing community. It's clearly like a transition from the traditional waterfall. When people transition from traditional waterfall to agile, there would have been some challenges in adapting to the same, adapting to the same. When from a fairly structured environment to an unstructured thing. So even the Pmbok itself, I feel it is graduating from a somewhat structured, kind of an approach to a more unstructured, but clearly articulated principles approach. It would be interesting to see how the practitioner community receives it and what kind of changes it goes through before it gets firmly established as in its new avatar. So that's all I have for today, and then we can discuss further questions.